Welcome everyone to Rebel Impact for another video where we talk tactically about Star Wars Destiny. I'm your host, Rebel Gray, and today we're going to talk about a few of the contributing elements to success to victory in the game of Destiny. Alright, so everybody knows we've got Worlds coming up. It's next week, and to those who are competitive players, you're probably already following along and doing a lot of the stuff that we're going to be reviewing here today. But for those that may be hearing all this stuff for the first time, I'm grateful to have the pleasure of bringing this all to your ears for the very first time. It's going to be like news to you, and you're going to be like, wow, why wasn't I doing some of these things before? And my goal here today is to provide you with a sort of behavioral framework for things you need to be doing in order to take some wins at tournaments, especially big ones like Worlds. And of course, nothing comes easy. Even if you are the best player in the world, you are still following a regimen like the one I'm going to talk about today while you're leading up to Worlds. And I'm not even close to being the best player in the world. And I know for a fact that my 4-3 record at my regional was due to a lot of factors that we're going to be talking about today. And if I remember to, I'll highlight a few of those as we go through them. All right, enough cryptic talk then. Let's start breaking down the elements of success so maybe you can place a little higher at your next big tournament, whether that be Worlds or something else. Be right back. So I've been to my fair share of tournaments, and throughout these events, I've seen people who know how to take care of themselves and those that don't. And I'm not just talking about taking a shower before the event. For the love of God, take a goddamn shower, okay, guys? I shouldn't need to tell you this, but just in case, yeah, I said it, okay? What I'm really talking about here, though, is the upkeep that a long tournament can have on your body and mind, and what you should make sure to do in order to prepare for that the right way. So here are all those tips in kind of a chain gun kind of fashion. Number one, get your rest, okay? If you're taking a flight, show up a day early if you can afford it. If you're driving in, make sure you grab a nap at the hotel or in your car before the event. And if you're local, just make sure you get a full night's rest, right? Try to do that regardless if you possibly can, okay? Rest is so important to our functioning, psychologically, physically, everything. And it's really the only circadian rhythm event that can literally contribute to psychosis if we experience a lack of it, okay? And that's some of my counseling knowledge for you there. You want to be able to think straight. And the best way to do that is to set yourself up with a good night of sleep. The more rest you get ahead of time, the better. It really, really counts. And people do not place enough emphasis on this. It's kind of sad because it's the simplest thing that you can do, really. Number two, prepare some snacks and stay hydrated. You know, I see a lot of people like ordering pizza and terrible food during the event, and that's all fine for keeping the carbs and the sugars up, but the best thing for you really is to have a light snack throughout the event, like some fruit chews or maybe even a piece of fruit, beef jerky, things like that. And when you can, of course, drink plenty of water. If you have a friend with you, keep each other going in this area. Check each other. Make sure you guys are snacking, staying hydrated, because for those long day tournaments, it's going to be worth it, okay? And when you get to the venue, know where the vending machines are in case you need to grab something if you're out of something, if you need to grab a light snack or something like that. So find out where those vending machines are, the nearest bathroom, and a water filling station if there's that, okay? And this leads into the next kind of few points, starting with establishing a between rounds regimen. And I say that because it's a matter of self-care. And that includes using the bathroom, getting your water, and snacking, okay? And, that's the time you're going to get that stuff done is in between rounds. But your regimen should not just be limited to biological needs. You have to remember your psychological, your emotional needs too. Friends, other people are going to ask you sort of offhandedly, so how'd you do? And you're going to feel compelled to answer. And, do that if it gets you off, okay? But in my personal opinion, you've got to use that rest time between rounds really wisely. And that starts with balancing game talk with life talk, okay? And part of that is also not overanalyzing your losses for the entire break, either in your head or to other people, okay? Because thinking that negatively is going to put you in a negative mind state going into the next round, okay? And you have to always remember that there's another round ahead of you. So focus on the present, and that will ground you for the future. You can't change the loss after it happens, okay? Consider, at most, the turning point of the game and how it impacted the outcome, so you don't do it the next time and move on from there. Don't dwell on it, or else you won't be focused for the next round. The last thing I want to say is to remind everyone to practice patience and keep it professional, okay? Everybody at the venue is there to have fun with the other competitive players. And something like Worlds that we have coming up in a week from the time of this video, people are going to want to, get to know those other players and stuff like that, all right? So mind your manners, keep it professional, like I said, have some patience, okay? Because you're going to lose some games, and that's just happened, okay? People are not there for your personal drama. If you take losses poorly, determine why that is, okay? It's probably somewhere in your past, get therapy, whatever helps you. And I'm being absolutely serious, okay? I am a therapist, so I'm totally being serious. There are some things maybe you need to unwind. Don't bring it to the game table. Impulse control, too, is something that a lot of players in this genre of games deal with. It's very common. Everybody knows that person at their store who blows up at events. He or she, it's not necessarily a bad person. They just don't handle loss very well. So keep that in mind when you're handling someone like that. It's not personal. It's not necessarily against you, but it is very personal for them. But also, just don't be that guy if it's you. Practice that patience, okay? Understand your triggers and things like that. Manage that feeling between rounds in the parking lot, at Sugi's happy hour, at the Hyperloop's happy hour, wherever you go. Just not in the venue. Take a deep breath and remember these words. In order to get ready for Worlds, there is a great deal of deck-related preparation that you can do. In fact, I think this is probably the second most important section in this entire presentation, second only to what we just talked about, which is that personal preparation, okay? And I say that because this lays the groundwork for everything, and not all of this is obvious, even though it might seem so as we go through it. All right, so you're going to Worlds and you've got a deck ready to go, and there was probably a lot of preparation that led up to that decision alone, like, for example, metagame factors that we're going to discuss in a few minutes and things like that. But you've got your deck, whatever that deck is, and now you've got a lot to do with that deck, all right? You've got to know your deck, and this probably sounds really silly, like, how do you get to know your deck? But of all of the areas that I want to mention next, all relate to how you can make that a reality. So number one, you should know all the cards in their deck, what they do, and most importantly, how they function. You should know their card text exactly. You should be aware of spot requirements on those cards because those make for very embarrassing moments if you don't remember them or read the card. You should also know what cards in your deck are one-ofs, okay? You don't want to discard or reroll the only copy of Hyperspace Jump in your deck, for example. You absolutely have to know this, and you have to be aware of it at all times, even when you're protecting it against a discard die on the table or something like that, okay? You should know your deck list well enough to know what is remaining in your deck based on the card in your discard pile, your hand, and on the table and stuff like that, okay? You should be able to say, I got these upgrades out, I've got this in my hand, and I've got this in my graveyard or discard pile, and I've got this in my deck. I know that somewhere in the next 8 cards is 1 copy of this or 2 copies of that. How am I going to craft my hand at the end of the turn to sort of know things? These are the sort of small things that go a long way. If you take that stuff a step further, okay, and that was all draw math, okay? Taking a step further, it would also be really, really helpful to know the basic math to quick calc those draw odds, okay, like I just mentioned. And knowing the last tip about your deck list really well is going to help you do that. You'll also want to know your mulligan odds in general. Okay, I did a video on this a while back, and I can pop it up here if you missed it. It has some shorthand ways to remember the draw odds. One of the slides is not the exact draw odds, but if you need them, I will give them to you, or you can calculate them yourself based on what you learned in the video. Beyond that, beyond the cards, you should also know your die odds. And this is incredibly important, and people do not take enough time to get this, okay? You should know common odds for your characters. For example, if you're playing Yoda and Hondo, each of them has 2 specials on their die. So there's a 1 in 3 chance on one die, on one character to roll a special, and a 1/3 chance on the other die. So that's a 1 in 9 chance. That's an 11% chance to roll double specials, but it's a 55.5% chance to roll at least 1 special with the elite version of the character. Knowing things like that are going to be able to inform your reroll chances significantly and help you improve the odds of getting what you want, or just improving the odds. You really can't guarantee anything, right? You're talking about probability math. It's always going to say you have a chance of doing at least this or at least that. It's never going to be a precise measure. in most cases, we were just talking them rolling or drawing cards, okay? Also, you should know your deck's ideal turn sequencing. And I say ideal sequencing because if you know that, then you can learn how to best deviate from it to take the shortest detour and then get back on track when the course of the game allows you to do that. Of course, Destiny is not a perfect game, so you'll need to play a lot of games to get used to being derailed and finding your way back on track with things. And again, that just takes, a lot of reps, and that sort of leads to the very last bit of information and tips here, which is you got to play your deck. You got to play 5 to 10 hours or more per week. Play it casual, play it in weekly tournaments, play it on TTS and testing rooms. Find good players to match up against. You just got to do it, okay? The way you enhance your knowledge of most of these factors that are on this list here are to play the game, okay? Also, of course, knowing basic math goes a long way, and there's lots of people you can ask about the basic math at your store, or you can watch my videos or other people's videos or articles. There's tons of information out there about that if you're not very good at calculating numbers yourself. All right, so you're taking better care of yourself between rounds. You're drinking your water. You're talking to your buds about Altered Carbon on Netflix. You're happy with your deck, and you know all that stuff that I just talked about in the last slide. Now you get to the table, and you actually got to compete. So let's talk about the metagame factors that you have to understand to take your game to the next level in a competitive environment. And this is the stuff that you're going to hear people talking about the most, hands down, because you're talking about making meta calls based on all the information that we're going to be talking about here. And that may actually inform your deck choice to begin with, which leads you all the way back to the last slide, okay? So to go hand in hand with playing your deck, you got to be playing it against decks that matter. Okay, if you're playing your deck against tier 2 decks or worse all the time, you're not going to get in worthwhile reps, okay? And that's what you need. Most competitive players would agree that you need to be running your deck against a gauntlet of decks currently considered meta decks or tier 1, 1.5 decks. You hear that stuff a lot. That is really important. I mean, I can't emphasize it any more than just to say it's freaking important. And if you don't know what the gauntlet is, go out on the internet, look at what's going on swdestinydb.com. Go to the Hyperloops page. They have a gauntlet list there. Go on the Discords. People are talking about meta decks all the time, and you've got to know that stuff in order to know perhaps what deck to play, how to play around their strategies, all that stuff. Because knowing the meta and taking worthwhile reps against those decks is going to help you see the matchups and understand that sort of rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock thing we got going on right now. And this video is being shot April 2018, okay? And, it's not enough to see those matchups. You got to understand them. From the battlefield selection to the shield placement to the sequencing and the strategy of those decks to the cards that they include sort of in the standard or accepted package for that character list. That's all stuff you got to understand. To win, it's not good enough that you have a fringe knowledge of these decks, especially not the ones that are the most common. Okay? So right now at the time of this presentation, you might be talking about or hear people talking about Boba 7th, Bro TK decks, deck with Yoda. You might be hearing that Sabine is kind of out of favor, but maybe not. Hero vehicles and all of its variants are things that people talk about a lot. Hero Mill comes up a lot. But, there's also stuff that's sort of on the outside that people are also mentioning. Boba Phasma, Qui-Gon decks, Kylo Talzin, Thrawn Talzin, right? Sabine, somewhere in there again, right? So it's not just good enough to know your deck. You have to know your opponent's deck. And if you have access to a deck list, that helps. But it's not the entire answer. And so what a lot of people try to do here in this area is actually play the meta decks. It's not even to get good at them, but just understand sort of what are they trying to do? What is this deck trying to do? And how can I, if I'm playing my other deck, know how to counter exactly what's going on here? What do I like to have in my hand? What am I trying to mulligan for? All that stuff, it's a huge, huge part of understanding how to play competitively. And if you don't know that, you're not going to do well. Plain and simple. You're not going to do well. And what you need to know in that stuff are the major interactions, right? Or the game plans of those decks. Because not all decks are combo decks, right? But a lot of them do have two-card interactions, two cards that go together, right? You got to know those. You got to know what their win con is. What's their shortest path to victory? That will help you know how to disrupt it. That said, use your disrupt die as needed. Okay? Don't re-roll it every time because you think it's a blank. Knowing these interactions will help you play around cards that you know could be in your opponent's hand. Turn sequencing choices are going to vary a little bit from person to person by situation. Remember that there's not necessarily always a single path to winning. So, because the road to victory has many routes. So, when we talk about a concept like turn sequencing, which I did this long freaking video to, and a lot of people have commented on that or reached out to me on Discord or spoken to me about it at the store, wherever. You know, one thing I sort of wanted to emphasize after that, and I didn't, is that, you know, sometimes there are almost two best choices. There are two choices that are really, really good. One is always going to be the ideal choice, but sometimes your opponent knows that you're going to make the ideal choice, and they may be able to play around that in some way, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right? And that's why it's really good to know the other decks, get those reps in, understand the matchups, know their game plans, so that you can play a counter game as you need to. And of course, you know, to do all this, you're going to need time. You're going to need a lot of time. And this isn't something that many of us adults have. You know, if you're in your like early, mid 20s or something, maybe you've got the time. But if you're in your late 20s, mid 30s, and you're on the normal career path or usual career path or whatever, you know, you're probably going to be seeing your free time dwindle. And so that may cause you to consider, you know, a wider approach to things here. You know, you can play this game on TTS from home, and that's really helpful. But remember that when doing this, the pickup match stuff on there, it may not be as worthwhile testing because, you know, you get a random smattering of players on TTS sometimes. You want to remember to hook up with players on your Steam friends list that you know are good players, just like you would in your local meta, or go on Discord and find people that you know are good players and say, hey, listen, I want a game with you, whatever it takes. You know, I want you to play this, or I'm trying to play this. I want to know better. Show me how to lose. Show me how to win. Find your friend, you know, in that pool who plays Mill, or who's focused on aggro, or who plays off meta stuff, you know, that seems to like confuse or confound local players for whatever reason. Those are your resources. Find them, use them, reach out to them. Because if you want to win, you got to do all this stuff. All right, so before I head out of here, there's just one more little topic I think that is sort of worth going over, and my hair is all over the damn place today for whatever reason. And what I'm about to say, I say this on this channel a lot, and it's that there's always exceptions to the rule, okay? For this topic, it's not really any different. You can take totally poor care of yourself in the day event, show up with a hangover, win some matches, maybe by lucky rolls, decent turn sequencing, place top 32. Sure, that could happen, all right? It's not likely, but it can happen. But don't rely on luck, okay, to get you far in this game, because thinking that way discredits the skill that it takes to be a good deck builder and player in this game, and other CCGs too. You have to prepare to move ahead, okay? Don't take this stuff lightly if you're trying to be competitive. I did when I went to my regional and I placed poorly. Honestly, I knew the decks and the matchups, and I knew my deck super, super well, but I didn't get the reps in because I didn't have time. My time just didn't exist. And, you know, that had an impact on my performance. And I know that now to be 100% true, you know, looking back on it. I didn't make a good meta call because I decided to just play what I was going to play. And that kind of mentality is fine, but not if you're looking to actually go all the way, okay? So every piece of the puzzle here is just as important as all the other ones, because you may have a complete puzzle, but you've got that one piece that sort of doesn't finish the waterfall. And you're like, but I can imagine what it looks like, but it's not the same as actually just seeing what it looks like. And so you have to consider every one of these factors equally. None of them is really more important than the other, but taking care of yourself, to me personally, is probably at the top of the list for things that are important, because if you don't have your health, well, you don't have anything, okay? Another exception to the rule here is that you can know all of the decks super well, and then there's some combination of characters sitting across from you that, as far as you are concerned, wasn't part of a class, okay? And wasn't in the class, but now it's on the exam, okay? So what are you going to do? You're going to panic about it? It's not really going to help you. So what I'm talking about is the Dark Horse deck. And the Dark Horse deck may require you to know every card, even the ones on the fringe. But don't sweat it, okay? If you studied for the test, you're going to do fine. Just play your game, all right? Think. Use your brain. And think about the most relevant cards in similar matchups, because even a Dark Horse deck looks like some other deck that you've probably played or have heard about or known about it if you've done your proper homework, all right? Think about, based on the characters and the cards that you're seeing them play, what the deck is capable of. Watch their sequencing in round one and determine their path to victory. You know, these hybrid like aggro mill decks that some people play or I've seen played, Sometimes you don't know which way they're going to go. Sometimes they're waiting to see which way you go to determine which way they're going to go, right? So you want to watch their sequencing early and determine what that path to victory is going to be for them, okay? Don't just be an observer of the game. Be a participant in the overall battle and lead your heroes to victory. Now, the very last thing that is worth saying, and, is just remember that this is a game above all else. You got to remember that. And I know it's cliche, but seriously, have fun. That's what games are all about. If you don't place as high as you want, don't sweat it. It's not life or death, okay? Most of you aren't doing this for Patreon money, so relax. Take it all in stride and enjoy yourself. There's no better feeling in the world than to have a great time immersing yourself in your favorite hobby. And Destiny is no exception to that rule. All right, folks, you know the drill. The video is now over, and I say something like, hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this, and I truly do. All right, the best players in the world are going to be your competition at the highest level of play, and I'm very envious of those who are going to get to go to Worlds this week. Unfortunately, I'm not. My weekends are just completely wrapped up until July, so it's just not going to happen. But I wanted to do this video to sort of address the people who may be going into something like this for the first time, or looking to get into the competitive game, of course, right? And to know some things that are going to help you be better. These elements to success that people overlook sometimes. And the point is here, if you prepare yourself right, you give yourself the best shot at playing and at being your best self. Does that mean you're going to take it all? No, not necessarily, right? There's always going to be a better player than you and someone who prepares better than you, unless you're that guy all the way at the top. But that can also mean that there's a goal to strive for, and that's to be better than as many people as you can. And that's really the way you make a top cut, right? So for those going out to Worlds in May, in a week from now, right? Good luck to you. I want you to check out the articles from the other content creators that are out there to get you ready for competition. It's not going to be easy, right? And remember that there's no crying in baseball or Destiny. Just do your best, and that's all you can really ask for. So in short, drink fluids, rest, snack, know your deck in and out, understand the matchups and the meta, and be ready for anything that the craftiest players may throw at you. Oh, and while you're doing all this, may the Force be with you.